Hi, everybody, and thanks for letting me join this occasion by video. I'm sorry I can't be there, but travel's a little difficult right now. I've known Don a long time, and I regard him as one of my very closest friends, and not just in anthropology. I probably wouldn't be employed in the field if it weren't for Don, who interviewed me in a kind of last-minute handover of my application from Pomona to Don, who was interviewing at the AAA for Pitzer College. I had a series of one-year appointments at Pitzer and enjoyed the support of Don and my other colleagues to keep me going until finally time was up and I found a position at NYU where I still teach. Until then, I pretty much lived at Don's house. When I arrived in Claremont in 1976 to teach, it was early July and Wynne was 9 months pregnant. So Val, born very shortly thereafter that, has always been part of the Don, Wynne, Val family with whom I spent so many evenings in Claremont for several years. Not only did I keep Don company while he cooked pezzole and read a book and looked after Val all at once — Wynne had a more pressing job as an attorney — and we hiked Icehouse Canyon, often with Val in a back frame, but we also talked endlessly about our fieldwork and our interest in how people talked. Both of the communities we studied were heavily invested in what we understood as indirect speech, non-confrontational and elliptical if non-evasive discussions. I was only very recently completed my own fieldwork with Pintupi, and Don not much separated from his field research in Fiji with Indian diaspora people. We were a little segment in the anthropology field group that was much more focused on quantitative and psychological research, so our conversations were very much our own dialogue. We also shared an area, as existed at the time, of Pacific Studies at the Association for Social Anthropology in Oceania, where we could meet with fellow travelers who shared experiences there, although working with Indians and Aboriginal people, we were more or less outsiders to the core group of Melanesianists and Micronesianists. But we found a lot in common with them, and this was the time that Morris Bloch had published about political oratory, and others were writing about meetings, so Don and I organized a session at the annual meeting on language and politics in the Pacific. We invited our friends and colleagues, including Sandra Durante and George Marcus, as well as Rena Liederman, Jane Atkinson, Nancy Lutkehouse, Brad Shore, and Deborah Gewurz, looking for comparison of hierarchical and egalitarian polities and speech styles. These enterprises are never quite what you expect, and we invited Jim Clifford to be a discussant, as he was in those days interested in the French in the Pacific. I have to say, we really didn't understand what his comments were on our session, and he probably didn't understand why we looked so uncomprehending. The real treat of this was that the meeting was in Asilomar, which seemed incredibly exotic to me, relatively new to California's delights, and we drove up in Don's Volkswagen Rabbit. Asilomar's sleepy, woodsy environment remains so prominently in my memory, as well as the side trip to Monterey, Cannery Row and all. Don and Wynne were my guides to California, resonating with my time in Australia in a similar environment, and I've never recovered, even though I'm regarded as a lifetime New Yorker. Eventually, as ASAO procedures work out, we developed the papers into a collection, and Don and I edited the papers, wrote an introduction that drew on the papers, but was really based on the 4 years of incessant discussions we had had about indirect speech. And eventually it was published. The volume was important to us, but more significantly for me is that I could never shake my sense of speaking as a particularly constitutive social and political activity for Pintupi people, and it lies at the heart of the monograph I eventually wrote and pretty much everything else I have taught and thought. That's on the academic side, but Don and I have been friends in more important ways, and his unwavering friendship and kindness have been an anchor in my own life. He has certainly been my guide to music and arcane mysteries. Don is much more than the narrow life of academic anthropology, but he brought to his teaching when I was working with him music and the joy of music and its many varieties. He had more CDs than anybody I had ever seen. And can I say, if no one else has yet done so, that I have never met anyone who has read so many books and so unpretentiously possesses such wide knowledge. For the profession, many of you will know of his enormous contributions as president of the American Anthropological Association, but I would say that his work as editor of the American Ethnologist was absolutely the high point of that journal, not least because of his energy and care with editing, but because of his energy and care with junior scholars who he supported and tirelessly edited into visibility. I hope some of them are around to speak to this, but simply to say that what we call service from Don should be considered a gift and not a duty, and that's why it has mattered. These contributions to the production of academic knowledge, to the institutional reproduction, if not survival, of anthropology as a discipline, owe directly to Don's generosity with his time, but also his generosity as a person, as a human being. In our relations, it will not surprise you that Don is always the more generous in outlook, though I hope to have learned from him, and I also hope that some of my critical style made us a good team, or at least that Don could enjoy some of my more direct and caustic approaches. He is very tolerant. My daughter, Samantha, always says that Don is like her uncle, and he is, possessed of a genuine ability to attend to and appreciate people in all of their differences and challenges. But he has also incredibly strong influences that he brings, from his mother and from Wynne. You don't walk in this world untouched by people like his family. You must know that Wynne is the brilliant partner of Don's intellectual breadth and not a minor part of his intellectual and cultural insights, the ones that he brings to us with a force with which to reckon. I just want to say in closing that they are a remarkable family. They have done so much for me and have been such a wonderful presence. I wish them well on their trip to Portland.
Hi, it's great to be with you. I'm Annalise Riles, and I wish I were with you in person and not virtually, but so honored and happy to have a chance to say happy retirement, congratulations, Don, and thank you so much for all you've given me and the field at large. Don has had such a profound impact on my career as a scholar and in the ways that I think about how anthropology can happen in the interstices of institutions and in the world. And I really wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing if it weren't for you, Don. There's no doubt about that. I can remember still exactly where I was the first time I read Don's work. I was in graduate school at Cambridge. Marilyn Strathern said, "Oh, you're doing legal anthropology. You're looking for interesting stuff. You should read Don Brenneis' work." And I read about the Panchayat, and I was just blown away. I thought, wow, legal anthropology can be about sound. It can be about gossip. It can have all these implications for how we think about things like how institutions work, but in a softer, more complex way, a way with more angles, a way that's less beholden to existing categories of thought. I mean, all of that was just super inspiring from the start. I just was really aware that I was in the presence of somebody who was deeply creative and original and had this. So I remember that I wrote to Don with tremendous trepidation, thinking he's this famous scholar, he'll never respond to me. And to my shock, he wrote back this remarkable letter, this long, detailed letter, giving me really concrete feedback and advice and, reading suggestions. He's always full of fantastic reading suggestions. Helping me to frame questions and all that just for a stranger out of the blue. And I often think about that letter when I get contacted out of the blue, and I now recognize how hard it is to find time to respond to those people who write to us like that. But I always think, I owe it to them because of that letter that I received that was so transformational for me. And then Don invited me after I finished my PhD to Santa Cruz, and he was so kind and gave me an opportunity to meet with graduate students and it was and other faculty, of course, give a talk, and just remember feeling so welcome and so valued and so able to really just share and learn. And that was just such a wonderful introduction to how the Academy can be the best that it can be. And then, of course, Don was there at every stage in my career. I remember when I got my first negative review on an article, or I think it was my book. He was there to give me good advice. My first real challenge with a university press, and I felt so discouraged. He was there, kind of bucking me up. And so, in addition to all of Don's contributions to the scholarly canon, his generosity and his modeling of what a principled and caring academic career can look like is something that I always carry with me as a true model. I want to also just say that the anthropology of bureaucracy would not be the field it is without Don's work. That his work is really the turning point in the field in this generation, in which we began to see that we could ask a whole new kinds of set of questions about institutional practices, about documents, about meetings, and we could, through that process, not just understand bureaucracy in more interesting ways, but also begin to think about what ethnography is in a new way. That he was one of the first to courageously show that serving on a committee evaluating grant proposals could be a form of ethnography. Being a department chair could be a form of ethnography. Being a president of the American Anthropological Association could be a form of ethnography. And that it could both elucidate things about those phenomena, but also make one better as an institutional actor, and make one more effective by approaching those tasks as ethnographic engagements. I always think of how he explained to me that the academy is a lot like a panchayat, and that semi-egalitarian, sometimes egalitarian ethos is, tricky to navigate, and that he had learned how to do that in Fiji. And I certainly go back to his work from time to time just to manage those questions. I will say right now in my role as associate provost, I think of my work very much in those terms. I wouldn't be interested in this work had it not been Don showing the way for how one can make it an intellectually challenging, dare I say, scholarly enterprise at the same time as it is a lived practice, and that scholarship does not happen only in texts, that it also happens in the way that one embodies one's insights and lives them through one's life. And so that ethnographic curiosity is above all the inspiration that I take from Don's work. But I doubt that any of this is going away. I'm sure that retirement brings many, many more opportunities and ways to continue that kind of ethnographic engagement into the next phase. And so I'm, for one, really excited to see what Don will choose to do next, and hope that I can be a part of it continuing forward, because Don, you give me hope. And I just want to say congratulations, and looking forward to all that is to come. Thanks so much.
Hey Don, it's Steve in the studio in Santa Fe with Andy here. And really sorry I can't be with you today. And but I just want to say that it's been such a wonderful pleasure to know and work with you so much for the last, I guess it's 40 years now. And I know that's going to continue, and I know you're going to continue doing all kinds of amazing things. But I know the people at Santa Cruz will miss you most. We miss you here in Santa Fe, and hope we can lure you back with some really steamy green chili from time to time. So I'll sign off. I know there are lots of people who want to say hello to you, but have a great day. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. I have a letter for Don and Wynn. Dear Don and Wynn, I wish I could be there with you, but my better wish is that you will both savor every minute of the evening's festivities as they unfold and for a long time to come. Don, I hope the joy of the occasion is enough to soothe the anguish of being the center of attention for a few hours. I won't keep you too long now, but there's so much I'd like to say to you, about you, for you on this happy night. Joyous recognition of your career so far and of your own remarkable self. Instead, I'll talk to you and Win together, because you were together when we first met some 50 years ago, give or take a few months, and because you're always together in each other's speech, mutually referring, wonderfully co-curious, musical in your sympathies. I'm probably not alone in thinking of the phrase Don and Win as a distinctive pronoun, singular and plural, subject and object, and so I'll leave it to you two to decide what, if anything, in this letter should be parceled out between you. Anticipating the evening, I've been rereading Don's work, Win, and something caught my eye in one of my favorites among his writings, his chapter in Language and the Politics of Emotion. He has a great deal to say about many things there, especially in the way the presence of an audience intensifies the emotion of speech performance in Bat-Gaun, compressing form and content. I imagine that might be something of the feeling tonight, since even from a distance, I feel my own emotions intensified: admiration, gratitude, trust, respect, delight, for and with you both. One line in particular jumps out to me towards the beginning of the essay, where Don acknowledges the guidance, his word, of interlocutors in Bat-Gaun, and in the development of his understandings, again his word, of ethnographic matters at hand. His idea of a guidance of understandings comes to my ear as a new collective noun, something akin to a wedge of swans, standing in contrast to the singular edge, say, of my body of evidence. This idea of a guidance of understanding strikes me as vintage Don, conjuring the very possibility of ethnography first in the realm of mutual good faith, and only then, mutuality and all, in the realm of science. That sense of guidance glistens in his work on peer review and as an editor and peer reviewer himself, in his work on conversation and sound, in his collegial ethics, in his leadership of the AAA, and no doubt other pursuits. I remember asking Don once, years ago, how he kept up his energy for academic administration, given the dreary national politics of the time surrounding higher education. The very question was clearly alien to his spirit, and after a flicker of puzzlement, he answered by saying that he tried never to be cynical in his dealings with others, and that he was rarely, if ever, disappointed in this. A lesson in giving and receiving freedom that I've carried with me for decades now as a core principle. That freedom glistens in his ethnography and collegial dealings, and equally in his loyalty as a friend, sharing family, books, new music, the latest photos of Joachim and Esme. Don and Win, I am so grateful you are in my life, deeply grateful for every chance to enjoy your company, to learn from you, and to know that we share not only memories, but also, now that we've advanced to so-called retirement, the freedom to seek guidance of understandings amidst the cherished others around us. Fred joins me in sending love and heartfelt congratulations. We'll hope to see you both soon.
Well, I am so pleased to be part of this celebration for Don Brenneis. I'm awfully sorry I can't be there with you, but it's really nice that I'm able to at least contribute some thoughts and ideas. I want to say something about, first, the major contribution that Don has made to anthropological scholarship and also to anthropology as a discipline. And I'm happy to have shared some of these experiences with him, and it makes me even more pleased to talk about it. I want to begin by talking about work we did together comparing Hawaii and Fiji. I have always admired the legal anthropology work that Fred did on Fiji, and while I was working on Hawaii, we began to have conversations about interesting parallels and contrasts between the colonization process in these two islands that happened more or less at the same time. And as we talked about the parallels and differences, we decided we should organize a conference, which we did at the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe, and we had a lovely week-long conversation between Hawaii experts and Fiji experts, and we produced a really nice book called Law and Empire in the Pacific, Hawaii and Fiji. And it was a really fun intellectual exchange and a chance to see really significant similarities and differences and to build on his research and mine, and also, of course, our sociability and extended networks. So I benefited greatly in that conversation from Don's insight and his deep knowledge of anthropology in the Pacific and his focus on the legal dimensions of settler colonialism in each place. So I also worked with Don extensively in doing activities for the AAA, which, as I'm sure you all know, has been a major focus of Don's life, and he's made enormous contributions. I was engaged in the publications projects of AAA when he was developing Anthrosource, and we were just beginning in those days to confront the fact that publishing was changing dramatically. It was not going to be print, it was going to be digital. What were we going to do? And the idea of Anthrosource was a really innovative, ahead of its time project, which, having been part of the publishing wing of the AAA for several years now, I've watched how it has morphed into a really high quality publishing platform under the support of the Wiley Corporation, and has really helped to modernize and make sure all of our journals are of high quality and are all available collectively. And this was the notion of having a collective set of journals that Don was really committed to, and he made it happen. He is, as you all probably know, a very brilliant organizer and administrator. I also was privileged to be the program chair under Don, and had a good time in his wonderful house in Inverness helping to arrange the program, and realizing the complexities of doing this when in those days, which was about 2003, we had to use sticky tabs to figure out what the schedule was, which seemed like a sort of an odd approach to have to do, but that's the way it is. And so if people had overlapping schedules, there was not much one could do about it. So I wanted to just say, kind of in conclusion, that it's also interesting that he has moved ahead in areas of looking at things like peer review and bureaucracy, which have turned out to be really critical new issues in anthropology. So it's clear that Don has always been a forward thinker, a leader, and a dynamic institution builder. And I think these are all really major contributions that Don has made, and I've been really pleased to be part of it. So congratulations, Don, and best wishes for the future.
In the early 1970s, I was pleased when the dean told me that Pitzer College had hired the kind of anthropologist who would bolster the fledgling linguistics program. That was the good news. The bad news was that this individual would not arrive for another year. Don Brenneis had managed to arrange what I think might be unique in the history of academia, managed to arrange a year's leave at Pitzer College before he had taught a single class. That will not surprise those who know Don Brenneis and his ability to manage deals. The search committee had actually recommended Don in the hope that he would help create the yet-to-be-hatched program in folklore. But Don, as typically, saw the dangers there, and when he arrived, he decided to align himself with linguistics instead. And the program in folklore at Pitzer remains unhatched. We taught the language and culture class together for a number of years. A class that provided some relief for linguistic students from the rigors of phonology and transformational grammar, as we called it in those days. And it also encouraged anthropology students to pay more attention to what people said and not just what they did. The class came to be known as the Ron and Don Show. At that point, Don, characteristic of many members of his tribe, was addicted to long polysyllabic words which most people didn't know. And I would translate those words into basic English. But he did the same for me when he would turn my Britishisms into plain American. There was always a good atmosphere in the Ron and Don show. I once interviewed 10-year-olds in Scotland and asked, what makes a good teacher? One boy said, a good teacher makes you laugh. I think that the teachers of the Ron and Don show were probably good by that criteria. We only published one work together, an anthology of a collecting of papers on linguistic anthropology entitled The Matrix of Language. It sold quite well, perhaps not only because Don assigned it in his larger classes. Outside of academia, we shared an interest in music, though his tastes were broader than mine, and I never grew to share his enthusiasm for gamelan. While he was amused at my preference for what we came to refer to as grumbly early English music. I often thought that it was somehow typical of Don that he himself played the viola, the self-effacing viola, rather than the more flamboyant violin. Don is also a voracious reader, and I have often benefited from observing what he was reading at the time when he was with us. Last week, he was reading Autumn Light by Pico Iyer. This is a book about retirement and reminiscences set in a nostalgic Japan. I'm not sure to what extent Claremont, Santa Cruz, Palo Alto, or Portland, Oregon will provide similar nostalgic environments for Don's reminiscences. But I'm sure of one thing: he will find plenty of opportunities to continue his career as a world traveler, addressing other people's problems.
Greetings, everyone, from Spokane, Washington. Don, how are you? Congratulations. This is the big day, the big time, the big moment. I really had, other than saying thank you, I really have or had no idea what to say. So I wrote a little monologue so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say, but it's probably pretty corny to sit here and read to you guys on this video. So I'm gonna scratch what I wrote and just say, Don, I'm really grateful for everything that you've done and helped me accomplish, all the mentoring. I will say that when I arrived in Santa Cruz in 2011 for grad school in the department, Don was a big reason why. I was living in Los Angeles at the time when I was applying. I was hoping to stay in California, and I had really pinpointed Don as someone that I was interested in working with because of his expertise in legal anthropology. And Don was very warm and welcoming. And I think it also helped a lot that his wife happened to be a lawyer. And I think with that background and experience in his family, he kind of understood what I was going through in my transition from working as a lawyer to becoming a grad student and to researching an area of anthropology that was very law related. So, yeah, I'm just ever so grateful, and I wish you the best in all of your future endeavors, Don, in Portland and beyond. So, sorry I can't be there with you guys today. I would actually much rather be in Santa Cruz right now than Spokane, Washington, but what can I say? Anyway, thank you, Don. I wish I was there with everyone, and I miss you guys. All the best.
Don, I would have loved to be there to celebrate in person, but since I can't, let me send a few words from Denmark. You were an important part of my UCSC education in so many ways. As a grant writing guide and as a model teacher when I was a TA for your language and culture class. But most importantly, you were a stalwart supporter of my wacky salmon dissertation work. Since your daughter Val is a fisheries biologist, I never had to convince you that salmon were a worthy topic of study. You were enthusiastic about fish from the beginning, and you even sent one of my early papers to Val so that I could get feedback from someone who knew salmon biology better than I did. Over the course of many years, such seemingly small acts made a real difference. To further illustrate this point, I'd like to read an email that you wrote to me more than 12 years ago, in which I saved due to the significance it has come to have. Friday, September 22nd, 2006, 8:08 p.m. Dear Heather, just returned from meetings in the UK, where I heard a great paper, mostly about salmon. Norwegian Anthro, now working in Tasmania, and on transnational regulatory regimes around salmon. Anyway, we talked a bit about your project, which she thought sounded great, and she hopes you'll get in touch. Her name is Dr. Marianne Lien, and she's at the University of Oslo. Check the Social Anthro website there for her email address. Very smart and interesting stuff, and I think you'd find being in conversation interesting. Best, Don. The gift of that initial introduction to Marianne has turned out to be life-changing. Marianne invited me to my first international workshop, became a member of my dissertation committee, invited me to join her project at the Norwegian Center for Advanced Study, and introduced me to two Norwegian colleagues with whom I now have a new collaborative research endeavor on trout. Just as importantly, I'm now privileged to count Marianne among my friends, as well as among my colleagues. I want to share this email and the relationship it spawned because it shows the importance of Don's kindness, which is at once everyday and extraordinary. It is just one example among many of the rich academic networks that Don has helped to build. When I say networks, I want to be clear about what I mean. Don taught me through his actions that, contra the languages of business and professionalization, networking is not reducible to a strategic project. Instead, it is one of generosity, enthusiasm, and abiding passion for scholarly world building. Don, through your example, you remind us to refuse to be too busy to foster connections, send seemingly small emails, or help students who are not our own supervisees. This commitment to holding space for generosity and kindness is a key lesson that I have learned from you that shapes my way of being in the academy. Thank you, and wishing you all the best for a retirement filled with joy.
Don, I really wish I could be there today to celebrate your retirement, but instead this will have to do. So just a few words about you today. I guess the first thing I wanted to say was that Don was the reason I originally applied to and ultimately came to Santa Cruz. I knew his work on language. I had not at that time been aware of his work on law and bureaucracy, which actually ended up being a really important, or probably the defining key themes in my academic career. And his nuanced and sensitive approach to both of these issues, which defy easy analyses and generalizations in terms of power. I mean, one of the things I love about Don's work is that he shows that power works in a way that's multi-sided, and also is open-ended in a way. And I think his scholarship and his intellectual approach really taught me to appreciate I guess the openness of these kinds of forms that are oftentimes written off as or analyzed as being somehow over-determining in terms of power relations. So that has been a really, really important part of my work, and I think my anthropological approach more generally. I think a larger comment was that it's really a pleasure to have had an advisor who one can admire, truly admire. Not just as a scholar, but as a person. To cite Alana Gershon, with something she said over dinner at some point, Don has mastered the art of being a mensch, just being a wonderful all-around person, supportive in so many ways of so many of us. And it's so funny because everybody knows Don. You know, Europe, US, his networks are huge. And invariably, when I mention him, they mention not just his scholarship and his erudition, and not to mention his incredible reading habits. If I ever need a source, I can always trust that he will suggest that I should read something that's apt and relevant. But he's a spectacular person, and I don't have to tell you this, but I feel like I should say it anyway. And he's the kind of scholar I would like to emulate, which combined with Santa Cruz's really collegial environment sort of came to form the values that I think I'm going to keep trying to practice and hopefully cultivate in my own graduate students going forward. This kind of, let's say, generosity of spirit is even more important, I think, now, because I think in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion, I think, about how, let's just say, how the academy doesn't always attract the most kind and generous people. And somehow, though, through the networks that I've been able to build through Don, I've also found people who seem to share these values of generosity and kindness, and not about narcissism, not about success at all costs, but brilliant people who also are the kind of people you might actually want to spend time with. Don is kind, he was always kind as an advisor and unfailingly supportive, which now that I have 3 of my own graduate students, I'm learning is not always the easiest thing to be. He's patient and playful. We spent a wonderful couple days in Maine back when I was at College of the Atlantic, when Don and Wynn came and spent a few days with me and Salvatore and our dog Fritz, hiking and enjoying the sun and swimming and just having a good time and having some great conversations as well. And the final thing, which I really am going to have to learn how to do something about because I have not been very successful so far, is that Don, I really admire his wonderful work-life balance. He's actually one of the few people I know who might actually be able to have a good time in retirement because he hasn't neglected those aspects of life that are so important, but which so many of us do, I think, in academia, undervalue or not attend to, and that's friends and family. So anyway, those are just a few of the things that rose to the top this morning that I wanted to share with you, and I wish you a wonderful day, and I know I'll see you again soon, but just sending you all my love and congratulations and my deepest thanks for your wonderful work and mentorship. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Riedelsing, and it is an honor to be able to participate in this tribute to Don from Santiago de Chile. Not an easy thing to do for me, since I don't like to speak in public, even if I don't see you. I don't have a teleprompter, and apologize for looking down at my notes. I will also address you, Don, in the third person, due to these peculiar circumstances. It has been 10 years now since I finished my dissertation on the Pacific island of Rapa Nui. in the anthropology department of UCSC. Don accompanied me patiently on the long journey of the previous 10 years as my advisor. Although I have a Dutch passport and a Dutch spirit, I have lived in Santiago for many years. To avoid an empty nest syndrome, I decided in 1997 to return to anthropology and applied to several PhD programs in the United States. When I was accepted in Santa Cruz, Don became my advisor, and I didn't realize at that moment how lucky I've been. The main thing I remember about our relationship is that Don was always there, always available. In the years to come, before my qualifying exams, my office was across from his, which allowed for easy communication. The other thing I remember is that Don would never push me, set deadlines, or otherwise disturb my hectic life as a graduate student. He would make suggestions, but never impose. So I was able to avoid the feeling some of my fellow students had. No tears, no sleepless nights. Thanks, Don. And then, of course, his work on Fiji and his extensive knowledge of the larger Pacific became an important asset to the development of my own ideas. So were his expertise in legal and political anthropology, since my work touches on both of these fields. As the avid reader he is, he would always recommend readings relevant to my Rapa Nui project. We also had the same fluent communication when I was Don's TA, and I remember vividly the many cups of coffee we had together walking to the other building across campus, which name I now forget. I do not forget, however, the beautiful restaurant where we had a splendid dinner just last year in Santiago, where I could present him the Spanish translation of my English book based on the dissertation, which I honestly believe would not have been able to do without Don's guidance. Thank you, Don, and I wish you a great life ahead.